All right, so here we have our math history overview of the ancient and classical Greek mathematics. So we start off in Egypt. Just to move this around as we go. Start off in Egypt around 1650 BC, and then we start to move into Babylon and the Mesopotamian area, which is going around the same time, but we start to see mathematical developments a little later from them. And then we move into early Greek in Euclid's time, between 600 and 100 BC. And then we get to Ptolemy after that, around 100 AD, a little bit after Jesus' time. And then we have the end of Greek mathematics, going from about 60 AD to about 400. So we'll start with an ancient Egyptian mathematics. So we start to see the first dynasty to rule both areas of Egypt, both the upper and lower, above and below the Nile, dating to about 3100 BC. So there's a long time before we see any of the mathematics start to appear there and start to see any of the developments they've been working on. A lot of our knowledge on Egyptian mathematics comes from papyruses, which were recovered parchments from their time, which they had written all of their findings on, and we can evaluate and try to understand how they calculated their stuff. We have the Rhind mathematical papyrus and the Moscow mathematical papyrus, which is our big two that we find a lot of our mathematics that we see the Egyptians doing in their time. Mathematics back then was mostly just used by the scribes in the government for trade and legal purposes. Wasn't a whole lot of theoretical stuff going on. And we'll start to see more developments in astronomy and starting to use mathematics for things going on around the Earth. And we'll see the Egyptians had two different number systems for writing one of their hieroglyphs, and then another one just involving written language for both for trade and for other purposes that they would be using mathematics for. And then we move into the Babylonian mathematics, which the Mesopotamian region is actually probably older than civilization in the Egyptian region, but we do not start to see our mathematical developments until a bit later in this region. Before we start to see any mathematical growth, we do see rapid expansion under the third dynasty of Ur in this region, starting to develop a society and to get civilization kind of rolling and developing both mathematically and just as a society. So we still see here mostly mathematics still just being reserved to scribes for legal purposes. That being trade or other things, mostly just to do with how can they evaluate what they have and what they're selling and what they're getting, to know what things cost and how to do proper business. And most of our stuff from Babylonian time and from the society was discovered on clay tablets in recent history, mostly coming from the 1800s and after. And most of their geometry was related to agricultural or building purposes. Here we see the dimensions of a grain pile. And so we can kind of get a view into why they used mathematics. They used it to discover how much grain they had. And this is a picture of what they would have been using in their time. So then we start to move into Greek mathematics in Euclid's time. And so we actually don't have much written evidence, really no written evidence of the first millennium Greek mathematics. But based on future Greek mathematics, we can start to see where they were going in that time. And as we can see over here, they used a ciphered system off their alphabet to give value to numbers. They used a base 10, unlike the Babylonians. We see a base 10 here. It's got 1 through 10, and then the 10 since 100s. And actually, the earliest findings of these were in tunnels on the island of Samos. So That's pretty cool. And we have Pythagoras from Samos, but spent most of his time in Egypt and Babylonia. Started to shift the culture of just scribal use of mathematics to start to put mathematics in the same boat with philosophy and understanding astronomy. So start to see that shift from purely just used for trade to start to understand things about the world around us with Greek mathematics. See Plato developing Plato's Academy, his school that he founded in 385 BC. And we start to see, again, this continuation of the Greeks applying mathematics to philosophy and logic. And Plato did a lot of work in putting mathematics in the same ballpark as logic. Aristotle was one of Plato's students who just continued on this work with logic and mathematics and connecting those two. And then we come to Euclid, who was believed to be one of the first scholars of Alexandria, and what he produced the Elements, which was basically a collection of all of mathematical discoveries up to this point. He collected them all into one book and published it, and it is one of the most published books all time, published and translated underneath the Bible. So pretty important to all cultures around the world. And it really was just like proof after proof, and not a whole lot of extra stuff, just really just the real meat of mathematics. And it was the standard for centuries, and it's still influential today in the mathematical processes and geometrical proofs we have today. Then we get to Ptolemy, who really brought Greek astronomy together in the mathematical collections and starting to collect all of these ideas that they've been working on for all these years. And most astronomical work after Ptolemy was all based on his work. And we have a picture of him over here, and we start to see this continuation of math moving to the intellectual. And we also see at the same time, we don't really hear a lot about Roman mathematics, even though at the time Rome is very big and it's kind of encapsulated the Greek culture and the Greek nation. But we see the Greeks still holding a mathematical crown because the Romans didn't really care about mathematics all that much. They knew the Greeks were really good at it, so they were just like, we'll just let them have that. So we see the Greeks still holding most of the progress whenever it comes to the mathematical world. And throughout all this, we see the growth of Alexandria, which goes further on from where we're at into being a very prominent role in Christianity as we know it, especially the formation of the Bible. That we see the early copies and collections of books we see coming from letters from Alexandria. And so the end of Greek mathematics is we see the continued prominence of Alexandria in both mathematics and philosophy. So we see that kind of that crossover and that cultural hold coming from Alexandria. We have some figures like Diophantus who started to introduce symbolic notation. Like the Egyptians and the Babylonians all had everything written out, but we start to see the Greeks introduce symbols into their math to make it more shorthand. And we are seeing the decline of mathematics and the interest in it. We see some attempts of some people to try and bring it back. Pappus is one who tries to revive it. Did not do a very good job. And Hypatia is the only woman to have substantial mathematical accomplishments to be noted. She was another one who tried to revive it, but is just on the far end. And we see the rise of Christianity and the decline of mathematics kind of coming at the same time as Rome is moving towards being tolerant of Christianity and then to actually becoming a Christian nation. We start to see the interest in mathematics starting to decline across the empire. So there we have the collection of ancient mathematics from Egyptian time all the way up to the end of Greek mathematics.